Excited. We have a wonderful webinar lined up for you guys today. Is business franchising right for you? And I have just a man to tell you about it. In a minute, before we get it kicked off, I want to make sure that anybody that has joined us today on our webinar, first and foremost, welcome. We're so glad that you are here live with us. Anybody that's tapped into Facebook Live, welcome. I'm so glad that you've chimed in. If you want to be notified of upcoming webinars, you can certainly register directly. You're just going to go to www.savivets.org/veterans. And you can just put in your name and email, and we will absolutely send you the notifications of our upcoming webinars. Anybody that's on replay, we're so glad that you came back to check us out. Again, make sure that you sign up so that you'll be notified of anything that's upcoming. So today, again, we're going to have Joel doing a wonderful presentation, and I'm going to make sure that any questions we're go ahead and address them. If you're on webinar, we have a Q&A box at the bottom. You can go ahead and plug in your questions and we will absolutely get to them at the end. Anybody that's on Facebook, if you just put it in the comment box, I will make sure that we definitely relay those over to Joel before we close out. So again, all questions will be addressed at the end. And with that said, Joel, do you want to go ahead and present yourself? Tell us a little bit more and go ahead and give us some great information.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so everything should be up and going here. I just wanted to give you a quick intro about myself and why it is that I'm giving this presentation. I'm a certified franchise consultant with the International Franchise Professionals Group. I'm also certified with the Franchise Navigator. It's a behavioral mapping system for placing with franchises. And I also have my master's in business administration. Not that I'm really using that, but it gives me a good basis of business to kind of talk about some of these things. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about, is franchising right for you? Franchising, in my mind, is a very exciting, it's like a segment of our economy, except that it covers almost every market segment in our economy. It's just like a segment of it. So we're going to talk a little bit about, what are the advantages, disadvantages, and what it is. If you're on this webinar, I'm assuming you have some interest in franchising already, or you wouldn't be looking at it. So what is it about your situation that might help you decide if franchising is a good path? So I just want to give you some, interesting statistics about franchising. It's growing. It's continuing to grow for a lot of different reasons. From the fact that it's a proven business model that you can kind of buy into. A lot of people don't really think of it this way, but it's almost like a partnership. So the franchise has this business model. It's got the marketing, the branding, and you're coming in as a partner. And they're training you, they're showing you the ropes and everything, but it's your business. So this isn't like you're being hired. You're not an employee. This is your business. And there's some stringent rules to make sure that the experience in one franchise is very similar to another. But it shouldn't be confused at all with like being an employee, because it's not. And because of that basis, it also makes it so banks like to lend to franchises. And when banks like throwing money at things, they tend to grow. And franchising has seen that. It's growing. And, depending on your perspective, it can make it difficult because of the growth in the franchise sector. I think a lot of small businesses will struggle competing against franchises. But the reason why that is a lot of time franchises offer a superior customer experience, and that's overall good for the consumer. So I like franchising, and once I kind of just came across it, it was something I was very passionate about, and so that's why I'm here telling you about it today. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of franchising. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here. There's two primary categories. There's where you're distributing products for somebody. I don't really work with this type of franchising at all. If you were interested, I could try to direct you in a few locations, but this isn't really where I spend my time. This is the business format, is the format where most people are going to be getting involved in franchising. Some of the big names you might recognize: McDonald's, Subway, Supercuts, but there's a lot of franchises. There's several thousand out there. Some of them are regional based, some of them are city based, and some of them are nationwide. Now, inside that business concept, it can be further broken down. You've got your home based businesses, which is all types of stuff you can do from home, whether it's mobile based. If you look at the automotive industry, the children's educational industry, business coaching, training, so many different types can be run out of the house. And you're going to be going out a lot of networking. Service-based is going to be, they can be home-based, the service-based, but it's going to be more about marketing. It's going to be less about you providing providing the product or the experience, and it's going to be more about your marketing skills as opposed to your ability to teach a class or manage a team. The location-based is going to be the most expensive by far. When you include build-out, banks like lending for it, but it still costs a lot of money. Typical of that is going to be like a restaurant, where your typical restaurant, there are options out there that can get you in for less than $300,000, but typically you're going to be in the $500,000 plus range to build out even the most simple restaurant concepts. And when you take, say, 20% of that, it's still a lot of money. So yeah, location-based is definitely the most expensive way to go. But it also has the best potential for passive ownership. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. So here's the different types of franchising. You've got single, multiple, area development, and master. So a single is, I'm going to open one location or start one service-based business. Multiple, there's usually a development plan. So you'll take out one loan. You'll open one location, and your goal is to get 3 locations open within 2 to 3 years. With those, you generally pay a cheaper price. So most franchises, they'll say, like, for one unit, the franchise fee is $30,000. For a 3-pack, you can get 3 for $60,000. So if you're going to open multiple locations, there's cost savings to be had, but it does cost a little more upfront. But on the plus side, the money that you pay out to buy those franchise fees up front can be credited as your down payment for loans in the future. So $30,000 would go towards your first location, and then $15,000 would go towards your down payment for the next location. And we'll talk about financing a little more later. But that's kind of how that goes. Area development is where you take the concept, pretty much everything about the multiple, and you just economy of scale the crap out of it. You could take, say, I don't want one franchise I work with. They just signed an area development deal in Atlanta to open 22 units. So one guy bought the rights to open 22 locations in one city. So that's going to be, it's a whole different scale. It's going to be a lot cheaper per location. When you get into area development deals, very cheap per location, but the overall cost gets very expensive. And then the most expensive type, in most locations, there are some industries, particularly commercial cleaning, where you can get into a master type franchise affordably. But for outside the commercial cleaning space, master franchises can get very expensive. And what that is you become basically a franchise's developer for a region. And then you find franchisees in that region. And then you split everything with the franchise. So the franchise has developed the business, it's developed everything. And then you go and you're the support structure for the franchise for a larger area. And you get a percentage of the royalties, you get a percentage of the franchise fees for any of the franchises you sell. And master franchising, while it is very expensive, it's also very lucrative. It's probably the most common way people start making real money in franchising is when they get into the master. And when I say real, I'm probably talking about, annually taking in, multiple 7 digits. But the problem is you got to have a lot of money to start it to begin with. So the challenges, especially in the veteran community, because I work primarily with veterans, system conformity, working within a system. This is a positive and a negative. On the positive note, franchises love veterans because veterans, by and large, if you say, hey, here's how you do something and you'll be successful, they'll just take it and run with it and do it better than anyone else. And franchises love that. On the flip side, a lot of veterans that get out that are very entrepreneurial are almost too entrepreneurial. They don't want the confines of a system. They've been doing it for 5, 10, 20 years. And they want to, make their own stamp, build their own thing from scratch, which can be a whole lot more difficult than trying to start a franchise business. But for them, it's not necessarily about the difficulty. It's about, the just wanting to build something that's your own. And there's nothing wrong with that. Part of what I do is I try to figure out, is this a good fit or not, the franchising system. So you can be too entrepreneurial. It can be a problem working with the system conformity. But on the flip side, it's probably a veteran's greatest strength, and why franchises, almost any franchise I've asked, if I say, what's your ideal candidate as a franchisee, they'll say veterans. And a lot of them offer discounts for veterans for that very reason. It's not a risk-free investment. I believe it's lower risk, and I believe the fact that banks like lending to franchises reinforces the fact that it's much lower risk than opening your own business. But that doesn't mean it's risk-free. So when you're comparing this versus going out and getting a job as an employee, the risk factors are going to be completely different. This is going to be higher risk than being an employee, because you're going to be investing your own money into making it happen. I don't want to spend a whole lot of time on each one of these points. The previous business experience is helpful, especially with franchises that are geared towards marketing. They're looking for people with marketing experience, which you're not going to get in the military. But there are a lot of franchises where you don't have to have previous business experience. And you all have leadership experience to some degree or another, to a greater extent than you're going to see in the civilian world. So as far as the ability to run a business, I think you're all kind of there. But you have to manage your expectations. You have to be realistic. I'm never going to be someone to tell you that anything is no risk or foolproof, because that just doesn't exist. I want to cover the fees real quick. So there's 3 fees that you're going to have in a franchise business. 2 of them you're not going to have in your own. The ad fund, I would say you need to be spending money on advertising anyway. So that's kind of it really depends how they use their ad fund. But the franchise fee and the royalty fees. The franchise fee is going to be a one-time fee. You only pay it once, and that usually will include all the training you need. A lot of times it will include different specific equipment and stuff. That really depends on the franchise. But there's a lot of proprietary stuff that will often be included in a franchise fee, and then the franchise. But the bulk of what the franchise fee covers in the franchise perspective is it covers their marketing, covers their cost of trying to find new people to come in and start their franchise business. The royalty fee is where the franchise makes their money, and it's where you kind of have to kind of look at a franchise's support system and make sure that they're earning that money. It's not wrong that they're making money. They're providing a heck of a service, saying, hey, here's a built-out business, do what you need to do. But there should be ongoing support. It shouldn't just be you paying out. There are franchises out there that are kind of like leeches that, once they get you up and running, they just kind of let you go and kind of take the money. A good franchise is going to offer solid support, and they are going to make you more profitable by being an ongoing member of their system. And the royalty fee, the other thing with royalty fees is it can go into branding. So especially if it's a stronger brand, especially in your area, that royalty fee kind of covers the ability to use that brand. So there's value that goes into it. I think that there's a lot of value that goes into all the costs associated, but the costs are there, and they increase your risk as someone who's debating if they want to start their own business by themselves, use a franchise system, or just go be a W-2 employee. The opportunities, freedom. So, in the military, you're told where to go, what to do, when to do it. With franchising, I work with about 350 franchises, but there's over 3,000 total. You shouldn't have to do something that you don't like or don't enjoy. There's no reason to do that. And it's the same thing if you go to get a job, your job is usually going to pigeonhole you in whatever your experience is. If you're, my cousin got out of the Navy, he was fixing up aircraft, helicopters, and now he works as a civilian fixing up helicopters. If that wasn't something he enjoyed, then is he kind of stuck there unless he wants to just restart his career from scratch? And the answer is yeah, pretty much. But this allows you to use the soft skills, leadership, the ability to replicate a proven system. And you can take those soft skills and do almost anything that you want with it. You're not stuck doing what someone's willing to hire you to do. Uh, I've talked about financing, scalability. You can start with one unit and keep adding units as you get those established and up and running. So you're not kind of capped. A lot of times if you start your own business, you get it up and running, it's successful, but the main reason it's successful is you. And unless you completely retool that business to be able to be successful without you, you're going to have a real hard time growing. And I've seen that in my own family with my own entrepreneurial family members. Growing your business, scaling your business, very easy with franchising because all of their systems are developed to be able to be run by managers, franchisees, basically people who didn't start the business. And this can feed into empire building. We went through a whole bunch of that. One of the things I wanted to touch on is something that I've seen because I didn't start in franchising when I got out of the Navy. I started in commercial real estate. In commercial real estate, if you've got vacant buildings in an area, you can get those buildings for penny on the dollar. And having solid tenants inside those buildings can increase the value of that property 2 or 3 times what it's worth vacant. So one of the things I've noticed, and I'm planning on doing myself, in the future, God willing, is using basically guided commercial development. You get the properties, you get a franchise business in there, and that you kind of pick and tailor to the area. And most franchises are picky about where they put their locations. They'll have to agree that that's a good location, but then you can sell the commercial property once you've got a low risk business in there and make enough money to possibly open a second location and keep going and just keep the business. It's a way of an interesting way to use franchising to kind of build an empire. Most of those things we've talked about already. International opportunities. Most franchises are looking for ways to expand overseas. I've had people tell me, "Hey, I just want to go to the Caribbean and have a little bar on the beach." And there are ways that you can do that. Depending on where you go, though, most franchises when they expand international, they want to go with the master franchise license route, but not all of them. That's one of those ones where you can kind of explore and see what the options are. But yeah, international, if there's a place you really love and you really want to get back to, franchising could be a tool to get you there. But a lot of that's going to come down to the financial qualifications. So here's, just kind of a random quiz. If you look on this list, you'll see a whole bunch of different types of business people or employment tracks. And if you pick almost any background, there'll be example of successful franchisees that have come out of that. And the reason is because of the soft skills. It's not about your hard skills. It's about the soft skills that you develop while you're doing whatever it is that you're doing. And I kind of cheated, and I told you the answer to this other question. But yeah, when I first got into franchise consulting, I just started calling franchises, several a day. And one of my main questions I would ask them was, what is your ideal candidate look like? And I would say probably about 75% of them, the first thing they said was veterans. We love veterans for the reasons we've already talked about. And the other 25% pretty much got around to that, even if it wasn't their first answer. So what does franchising provide? And the detailed answer is going to be very specific to the franchise that you're looking at, because they're all different size, shapes, types of franchises. But in general, what you're going to get is the operating system. You're going to get training, you're going to get operating manuals, you're going to get ongoing support. You're going to get direction as far as marketing goes, and hiring. The franchise isn't going to hire for you. There was actually an incident that happened not too long ago where McDonald's employees tried to unionize across the franchise system. And they were like, well, you can't do that. These are all independent business owners. And they said, yes, but McDonald's, they give the ultimate thumbs up or thumbs down on whether an employee should be hired, which means they have a say in the process. and they had to revamp. But yeah, they didn't end up doing it. That would have sent a precedent that would have rippled across the industry. But yeah, the franchises aren't. They can give you direction, they can give you advice, but they aren't going to actually hire your employees. But yeah, they give you the brand, technical systems, and I would say one of the things that's often overlooked is they give you innovation. So for especially nowadays, the world is changing so ridiculously fast. If you're not constantly innovating, you're going to get left behind. And when you join a franchise system, the franchisor is the one that's constantly innovating on your behalf to try to make things happen. And I think that's a really important note. It's not something that they offer every day as a form of support, but over time, they have to be innovating. And that's something that you don't have to do as part of the franchise system. All right, so this kind of goes around to why do people franchise? And the ultimate thing is that it segregates or separates out the management structure, and it separates out the funding sources. So, there's ways to get money, but a lot of times if you go into private capital, they want huge ownership percentages of the whole system. Or you get this, kind of overloaded debt service. And then you have the management issue where the larger you get, the more layers of management that you need to make this happen. This basically lets them operate with very little total management requirements because they're selling their business to you and saying, hey, here's your unit, here's how you make it succeed, and we're going to help you, but ultimately you're managing everything for that unit. We're not going to be there, we're not going to be butting our head in every day. You just do the system and be successful. And it makes it very easy to grow large systems. And it also kind of insulates the total brand from the individual members. So if an individual member does something bad, it's very easy to kind of separate that out and say that's not, this isn't something that the whole brand has an issue with. As opposed to like Chipotle. I love Chipotle, but they keep having these kind of like health scares, and Chipotle is not a franchise. It's a main thing, and when that happens, it's like the whole system just kind of gets a black eye. All right, so here's where I want to get into a few questions, and I want you, if you have anything around where you might go take notes, write things down. This is going to kind of help you kind of ascertain whether or not a franchise might be a good fit for you. We're going to talk about a couple main things. So the first is, if you're looking at a traditional employment path, where do you think you're going to be in 10 years? And that's not to say that you're going to be on a better path if you go in franchising, but it would definitely be different. And so it's kind of thinking about which path is going to get you ultimately where you want to be in 10 years. Just simple planning that out. And what is your fear of the future? If your fear is going to be, I guess it goes back to risk aversion. If your fear is that you're going to step out into something and fail, then maybe going with a W-2 job is better. But if your fear is that you're going to be stuck and pigeonholed into something for the rest of your life, which is one of my fears, then franchising probably is good for you. So here's some more questions. We're going to go through a bunch of these. So I'm not going to go through them all in depth, but why would you want to own a franchise? What's the goal of trying to do it? How do you think that your life would be different owning a franchise versus W-2? Because there's going to be lots of education stuff out there about finding the right job. I don't need to go through that. So I'm going through franchising. How would your life be different if you were your own boss and owning your own business through a franchise system? What's your goal with the franchise? So one of the things I say when I'm advising people as far as resale value goes, because I have done some business brokerage stuff in the past, is my goal with any business is to try to, if you're going to resell it, try to get the earnings before income tax, depreciation, and amortization, also called EBITDA, to about 0.75 to a million at least. So if you're building it for resale value, I would probably say you want to go with the portfolio. You're going to want several locations that will get you to the numbers that you want. Are you looking for something that you can pass on to your kids? There's a lot of service-based businesses that are work from home that go down. I was talking with a home inspection franchise, and they have fourth generation franchisees, where one of their franchisees had this home inspection franchise and they passed it on to their kids, they passed it on to their kids, they passed it on to their kids. So yeah, that's very common, the whole passing things down. And if you have a big portfolio, obviously that can get passed down too. But as far as like the small family business goes, is that kind of more what you're looking at? Are you looking to be an absentee owner? Are you thinking about trying, like maybe put in 20 years, you've got one retirement under your belt, and you'd like to build something for 10 or 20 years and then put that under your belt and just retire on the passive income? Franchising can be very good at building passive income because you can some you can start out this way, others you work to get there, where you replace yourself with a manager and you're just basically just managing super high level stuff, 0 to 5 hours of time commitment a week. And that's what I consider passive. There's also semi-passive, which is basically like a part-time business ownership. You can do that alongside running a regular job. And that's, I usually say 10 to 20 hours a week for the semi-passive. And then there's one you have to sink all your time into. Are you looking for flexibility? I think we kind of beat that one to death. All right, so financial parameters. You can't talk about franchise ownership without taking a cold, hard look at your finances. The number one reason businesses fail, franchise or non-franchise, is undercapitalization. And and for a franchise business, the second is that you start it and your heart's really not in it. It's a lot of the resales that I've talked to, trying to figure out why people are selling. There's the people that are selling because that's their goal, their exit strategy is to resell. You have the people that are retiring, or their partner wants to retire and they're just gonna they just want to sell at the same time and move on to something else. And then you have the people that bought the franchise and it wasn't really what they thought it was going to be, and they didn't really sink their heart and soul into it. But that's not necessarily failing. The main reason they fail is money. And because of that, most franchises want you to be overcapitalized to even get into their franchise. So they'll have they'll even publish net worth requirements to be considered a candidate to be a franchisee, and liquid capital requirements. And it's usually much more than you would actually need. Not always, but usually you're gonna be overcapitalized for them to even consider you. So then it comes down to, do you want to partner? You got to get out with a buddy, or do you have friends or family back home that would want to partner with you to invest? Banks like lending to franchises. So as far as getting loans go, anywhere between 10 and 20, sometimes 30%. It depends on your credit and the type of business you're going to. So you're generally going to need between 10 and 30% down. And whether it's 10 or 30%, again, it's your credit, it's your net worth, the type of franchise you're starting. All of those things will play a role. Those are all good questions. So here's some financing options for you. Conventional loans from commercial banks. You got partnership or investors that sometimes you got families or friends saying, hey, you have your own little, backyard Shark Tank. How do you guys want to come in and partner with me for some money? IRA, 401k, TSP rollovers is probably the most common way that people finance franchises. And the reason for that is, say you've got money in a TSP, you can't touch it while you're active duty, but you get out, that TSP can be rolled into something else. And if you have a 401k or IRA, you can still do the same thing. So they've developed this program, and you start a C Corp, your retirement account gets rolled over to the C Corp, and then that retirement account can buy ownership stake in the business itself. And so it's not technically leaving your retirement fund, so you can spend that money penalty free. It does cost some money to get the program set up and managed, but it's a way that you can do it without going into debt. Or You can do it and go into debt, which is the way that a lot of the larger startups like restaurants are done. Is say you've got 50,000 or 100,000 in a retirement account, you can roll it over, and then that 100,000 can become the basis for a loan. So if you've got a 500,000 restaurant you want to start, that 100,000 can become a basis. Now the risk here, obviously, is that these are your retirement funds. So this is very common. It's a reinvestment of your retirement funds. But in the unfortunate situation where the business doesn't succeed, it becomes a risk factor because you could ultimately lose those funds. Because, like I said earlier, nothing is risk-free. So it's very common. It's also somewhat risky, but it does allow you to use your retirement funds. SBA loans, we've talked about home equity. Most people are familiar with home equity lines. Business credit, this I would only recommend if it's a cheaper, probably home-based business. And this is basically, you can get business credit, basically business credit cards. There are some companies out there that will sell you packages where they go and negotiate with banks on your behalf and get very good balances. Some say they can get you between 70, 150,000. And most of these cards, and I've actually used this program myself for my own business. So the risk with this is that if you aren't able to get the balances down within about a year to 15 months, which is usually the interest-free period for these credit cards, all the credit cards you'll get will have about 12 to 15 months interest-free. Then you're going to get a lot of debt on that, paying a lot of interest. If you have an operating business that's profitable at that point, you could then get an SBA loan to pay off those cards, but and refinance the debt basically. But in the worst case scenario, because again, a lot of this is about risk. Worst case scenario, you're stuck with high interest debt a year and a half after you started your business, and it can sink you. So again, options. It really depends on your situation whether or not it's going to be a good idea. I'm not going to say it's never a good idea. I've used it, but it's definitely not always a good idea. All right, timing. So you guys, obviously, you're dealing with timing. You're getting out of the military or trying to transition to something else. It generally takes 90 to 120 days, 1 to 3 months. I'm sorry, 90 to 120, 30 to 90 days, 1 to 3 months to get through the franchise purchase process. But if you're looking at 6 months out, it's still probably not a bad idea for you to get out and start trying to figure out the field. If you're more than 6 months out, I'm more than happy to talk with you about it, but we might not want to start digging into actual franchises until you're a little bit closer. But so when the other thing you're looking at with timelines is when do you want it to open? So if you're looking especially at the brick and mortar type franchises, when you start your business, you're going to have build out, you're going to have your pre-opening stuff, getting hiring. It can take anywhere between 6 and 12 months to open a location-based franchise. So if your goal, say you're getting out in a year, and you want to open a franchise and get it up running in a year, your time commitment on that's not going to be very high until you open. So I would say that. So at that point, you'd probably want to start looking. I would say even at the 12-month mark, because you can buy the franchise 9 months before you get out, and try to have all the build out done and everything by the time, so it's ready to open by the time you separate. So timeline is going to be important. You kind of have to decide which franchise you want to start. There are other ones where home-based franchises, you can start the franchise and start it up the next day. And for that matter, you could even start some as part-time jobs, especially in the business coaching, digital marketing spaces. You could start it while you're active duty, part-time, and then kind of transition. There are some franchises that are geographically flexible. Most of them aren't. So if you are getting out and moving, it can make it makes the planning a lot more difficult. If you're getting out and staying where you are, it's pretty easy to start the planning process early. What are your ideal business characteristics? So think about, again, this goes back to what I was saying before. Think about what it is that you want to do. What is it that you like to do? If you could decide that you want to do something for the rest of your life and make money doing it, what would that be? What kind of hours do you want to work? What's your ideal work schedule look like? Are you a morning person or not? If you're not a morning person, you probably don't want to pick a job where you're going to be up there, or pick a franchise where you need to be up at 5 in the morning. I'm not a morning person, so I understand the struggle is real. I would say with this, that the biggest takeaway in this is, what is it that you never want to do again? There's obviously things you're probably going to be doing that you don't want to do all the time. But if there's something you absolutely hate, if you don't actually take time to figure out what it is that you don't want, you won't even know not to look for it. So again, this is just taking a little bit of time, a little bit of planning, and actually asking yourself these questions, so that you don't get to the last week of you spend 3 months validating a franchise, and then the last week be like, you know what? I don't actually want to do this because of X, Y, and Z, because you never really thought about it before. So right now I'm just trying to get you to think about what it is. If you could choose, what would you do? Now flipping over, strengths, weaknesses, and sales. So when you're looking at different types of franchises, franchises that look for sales and marketing type people are very specifically looking for those types of people. So do you like sales? If you do like sales, if you like going out there and showing them what you got, and being that charismatic person that's making the sales, then that would actually help guide you towards those types of franchises. But if you hate it, if you hate putting yourself out there, that's something that you're going to want to know before you start the process, and something that you'd have thought out. Managing employees. This is something you have to think about. Think about your time in the military. Just about everybody has spent some time overseeing people in a large or small capacity. Was it something you enjoyed or not? There are franchises where you're a one-person army going out and doing things. There's franchises where you're managing an organization that could grow to be hundreds of people. So thinking about that can also help you guide where you want to go. Risk. We've mentioned this a few times, and this is something that's important for anyone. And this isn't just specific to franchise businesses. This is any business. So if you want to start your own business, or if you want to do a franchise business, I want to categorize this as starting your own business versus W-2. There's a risk reward thing there, because the W-2, if you're a W-2 employee, all of the expenses of the business are taken out before you ever get paid. So all of your boss's salaries, the marketing, the product development, all of that stuff's going to get pulled out. And then of course there's the profit margin. So there's what they're paying you plus their profit margin plus all their expenses equals the expenses of you doing what you're doing every day equals kind of the gross revenue of what you're worth. And you end up getting a small portion of what you're worth. But on the flip side, you go into a franchise or starting your own business, nobody's carving into what you're worth, maybe with the exception of the franchise royalty fee. But that, like I said earlier, should have its own level of support and benefits associated with it. But it's all on you, and it's a higher level of risk. So how do you feel about risk? What's the most financial risk you've ever taken, and how did you sleep? And how did your spouse sleep? So when you go into this, if you're married, if you have a spouse, it's not just about you. The last thing that you want starting a business is fighting a two-front war. And that the two-front war is you are fighting to make your business success, and you're fighting your spouse at home trying to tell her how this isn't a bad idea. You need to be on the same page. So I strongly discourage anyone from trying to force their spouse to go down this direction if they are super risk averse and they would rather you just get an employee job. So, but think about the financial risk. How okay are you with it? Because there's a lot of potential rewards, but there's also the increased risk that you're not going to have if you were a W-2. So this is kind of going back to some business characteristics. How important is status? Is this where you want to build up an image of yourself getting out of the Ferrari, or are you happy just making money going around and doing junk removal? There's a whole range of types of franchises that may or may not depend on image. I would say a lot of them don't, but some of them definitely do. Do you feel comfortable negotiating deals with people who are, are you, if so, like say you're a business coach, do you feel comfortable going and talking to a company CEO that has, 500 employees and telling him why, you'll have the training, you'll have all of the things to go through with the president, you'll have everything you need to be a success, but how comfortable are you actually approaching someone that has that level of power and that level of experience? Not everyone has that confidence, and there are tons of franchises that don't involve that. But I'm just saying, this is trying to get you to feel what are the ideal characteristics of a franchise business. So now, hopefully you're writing it all down. I did give you some warning that I'd be asking a bunch of self-reflective questions, but prioritize your preferences. Figure out what are the deal breakers, what are not deal breakers, what are the ideal characteristics. And that can help you when deciding between a W-2 and a franchise business. And it can also help you decide between starting your own business and a franchise business, or if you look at franchising, what type of franchise would be perfect for you. I want to quickly go over the franchise discovery process. So if you do decide franchising is the right fit, here is what you have to go through. So the initial thing is going to be like a two-way interview. You're going to connect with the franchise. You're going to have a bunch of questions for them, what they do. They're going to have a bunch of questions for you because they want to try to make sure that you're a good fit for their system, because you're going to be a representative of their system, and what you do, good or bad, could reflect on the whole system, and they want to make sure that what you do reflects well on the whole system. So it's going to be a two-way interview, and part of that's also going to be the financial qualifications. They want to make sure that you have the money to get it started. And on the money front, there are franchise options that could start with net worth, as some have no net worth requirement. 100,000 to 250,000 net worth range encompasses a lot of franchises. And as far as liquid capital goes, there are options down at like the 20,000 range. And then if you get up to 50 to 100,000 in liquid capital, a lot of options open up for you. It's not to say there's not options if you don't have a lot of cash, but obviously the more cash you have or the more you're willing to invest, the more options are going to be available. But in this initial conversation, they're going to be talking to you about your financial situation. And almost all the time, not always, but almost all the time, they're going to have you fill out sometimes even before the initial thing, they'll have you fill out a form that will have you lay out your finances so that they get a good feel that you can find you're a good financial fit for their company. Franchise disclosure document. It's a huge document. I've seen them from 150 to almost 400 pages. It's everything that's in there is required by the government. You're going to see a detailed cost breakdown of what it would cost to start the franchise business. You'll see the work experience of the franchisors. You'll see any fees or expenses that you're going to have to be paying on a monthly basis. You'll see the financial earnings representations. That's if you hear people talking about, we have a strong item 19. The item 19 is the financial performance representations, and it's not representation, statistics. And it's basically it's a statistical analysis of some breakdown of their franchisees. Usually, it's franchisees that are 2 years and older, and sometimes they'll have things like annual revenues. Sometimes they'll have margins. Sometimes they'll have whole profit and loss statements for all of their franchises. So they're all very different in that regard. But the key is, and this is where people can get frustrated or not understand it, is a franchise can't tell you how much you're going to make in the franchise system. All they can tell you is what's in that item 19 of the franchise disclosure document. So if you're wondering, how much money can I make? And they say, well, you can, our average unit volume is $1 million and our margin is 30%. They can say that only if it's in there. Then if you say, well, what about all of, what's your expenses? What's this? What's your labor? Blah, blah, blah. And if they don't have it in there, They may, kind of give you some rough generalizations, but generally, if it's not in that disclosure document, they're not going to be able to tell you about it. But that doesn't mean you can't learn about it. That's the next step, is validation. So in the franchise disclosure document, there's a list of all the franchisees that are currently in the system, and you can give them calls. And depending on how many there are, sometimes there are thousands of franchisees. You'll try to, call the ones closest to you or that are in markets that you think are most relevant or similar to yours. And franchisees are not limited in what they tell you about their specific experience. So they can say, oh yeah, we got a 32% profit margin. We're making, $1.2 million in revenues. We have these expenses. When I started up, it took me this much money to actually get my thing going. I was breaking even after 6 months. There's nothing. It's not to say they will tell you all that, but there's nothing prohibiting it. And a lot of franchisees are pretty open, because if you're on there and you are going to grow the system as a member of that franchise system, it growing and it building in brand power helps them. So they're kind of helping themselves if they are open about that information. The discovery day is kind of the last thing before you purchase. It's not always mandatory, but I always recommend it. And that's where you fly to their headquarters location. A lot of times you'll get through a ride around the local franchisee. You'll get to meet the support staff, meet the people that are going to be, that you're going to be basically partnering with. Because like I said near the beginning, franchising is kind of like a partnership. So you're going to meet the people that you're basically partnering with to launch your business. And the goal is, between the franchise disclosure document, validation, discovery day, there's no big surprises. You should know, if I buy this franchise system, here's what's expected of me in the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months. You should know generally what you're going to need to do, and you should know who it is that you're going to be working with to make that happen. So it's a very robust system. The government guarantees it. It's very highly regulated. So now that you've created this model, you kind of know what the process is. Kind of compare what you want to what reality is going to be. And then it kind of goes back to managing your expectations. Don't think that anything is a surefire thing, because there's risk involved in everything. But I don't like people that compromise or settle. If there's a franchise system and you get passionate about it because it's what you're looking to do, or it just seems like such a good opportunity in your area, you should go for it. But if you're just kind of like lukewarm, like, I could do it, keep looking for something else, because there's so many options out there that you don't need to pick something that you're not 100% sold on. So, is franchising right for you? Here's kind of like the rundown. Are you willing to wear all the hats? You've been military, you wear a lot of hats, doing different stuff all the time. You willing to follow systems? Obviously you can. The question is, you still want to follow them? That's kind of for comparing opening your own business versus a franchise business. Can you afford it? Make sure if you can't afford it, work on your 5-10 year plan and how you're going to get the money to get there. I can't kind of push enough to family spouse support. I think the ideal situation is, if you are married, that either your spouse is working to kind of reduce the risk of you going into your own business, because if your business is struggling, you're still going to have a place to live and eat, or they go into the business with you and they work with you as your partner in the business. That's kind of my ideal thing. But in the end, you have to make a decision. Indecision is kind of the killer of, all things, really, from whether or not you're going to eat without getting overly hungry going out to dinner for us married people that have indecisive wives. But yeah, indecision is going to sink anything that you try to get into. So make a decision. Don't just flounder around back and forth for months, because time and life is just going to keep passing you by while you try to decide if it's going to be a good fit. I'm not saying don't take your time to do due diligence, but you have to realize, am I being indecisive or am I being prudent? It's a question you're going to have to ask for yourself. So what do I do? I'm really happy to have the opportunity to share all this stuff with you. And If finding a franchise is something that seems like a good fit, you're more than welcome to try to do this on your own. But there are people like me out there. We're called franchise consultants, and this is what we can do. And a lot of people that are looking into franchising, there are people that are professionals in the franchising space that know everything about it, and they go and they build these these big massive organizations. But you as an individual getting into franchising, you don't have a lot of that background. You don't have a lot of that knowledge on what is normal, what's good, what's bad. I talk with people sometimes, and a random franchise just approached them, out of the blue and said, "Hey, I want you to consider our system," and they never looked at anything else. And they got into it, and it wasn't a good fit. So just because there's something out there that may sound good, most people don't really know how to kind of weigh one franchise versus another. And if you're not given the options, it can be a tough decision to make. It's kind of like if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't want to go out there and just try to buy a house probably without a realtor. You might be able to do some research. You might be able to do a good job. Coming from a family that is in real estate, I know that a good, solid realtor can make the world of difference, especially for a first-time home buyer. And for a first-time franchise buyer, trying to navigate all the ups and downs without getting taken advantage of can be difficult. So I offer a free service. I work with several hundred franchises, around 350, and I help them find franchisees. So if you want to get into a franchise, what I would do is I would talk to you. I would see what your background is. I use the Franchise Navigator system, which is a behavioral mapping program that gives me an incredible amount of insight into what it is that you personally find valuable and fulfilling. And I try to find a franchise, and I try to help you find a franchise that is a good fit. And then I walk you through the whole process. I try to be on every call if I can with every franchise. Obviously, it can't happen all the time. But my goal is to walk you through every single step of the process and find something that is a good fit for you personally, financially, and is going to get you to the end line to fulfill your goals. And the reason why I love it is probably the same reason I joined the military myself. I joined the military because I wanted to do something where I was helping other people instead of just working for myself. And what I do here is I help other people find good franchise businesses, give them that flexibility, give them that freedom where they don't feel like they're pigeonholed in their life. And they don't even pay me to do it. I get a referral fee from any franchise that you end up placing with, kind of like a job headhunter. If you work with a headhunter, they find you employment, but you don't pay them for finding you employment. And it's the same thing with this. So my job is to try to help you accomplish your goals. Someone else pays me to do it, and I love that. That's why I still dabble in some commercial real estate, but pretty much 90 to 95% of my time is now geared towards this because I find it personally fulfilling. So at this point, I am good at opening up for questions.
Awesome. Thank you so
much. I hope I didn't take too long there. I know I have a tendency to ramble.
No, you're good. You're good. We actually got 2 questions for you from our watch party on Facebook Live. So first and foremost, is there a franchise that involves real estate?
There are a lot of franchises that involve real estate, and it's a lot from different perspectives. So, my franchise list changes because most of my franchises are part of the International Franchise Professionals Group. They work with that organization. So one of them is Home Investors that I work with right now. They're the We Buy Ugly Houses people. They flip. If you want to get into home flipping, they are an incredible program. But I also work with property management companies. A lot of people can think about, I want to get into managing properties, owning rentals and doing this kind of stuff. But it can be very time consuming, very paperwork intensive. And the property management franchises have a lot of systems, marketing, all that already in place for you to hit the ground running and go. There was another systems, marketing. Shoot, skipping my mind. It was more of a commercial real estate. Oh, okay, yeah. So so then another way to get into real estate with franchising is they will have kind of these centers where you develop, kind of like I talked about the guided real estate development. There's several franchises that focus on that in the beauty and health and beauty space. When you're talking about like you bring in a bunch of different type of fitness personal trainers, or you bring in a bunch of different types of hair makeup artists. One opened up recently for join my group for the medical space, where you can renovate a commercial building and put in a whole bunch of different independent medical tenants. So yeah, there's a bunch in the real estate space. It's kind of I don't personally work with any of the the big real estate brokerage franchises. I know they're out there. I don't work with them personally, so I can't help you with the real estate brokerage stuff. But there's a lot of real estate type franchises that I can help with.
Perfect. Perfect. And then the next question was, how much is too much money for startup capital? Like what would be a better question would be, what would be like an ideal kind of,
that is I would say you can never have too much money. No, so it really depends what your goal is. If you are overcapitalized to start a business venture, I would say on one side that's good, because it lowers the risk of it completely. It lowers the risk of your business failing tremendously if you have more capital than you need. But if you have way more capital than you need and you're not doing anything with that other capital, you should look at maybe either scaling up your franchise purchase, or even talk to an investment advisor that can try to diversify. When you start getting larger amounts of money, diversification can be important. And you can diversify in the franchise space. There are people out there that have portfolios of hundreds of franchises in different industries, and because it is so scalable. So franchising is one way. If you have a lot of money, franchising is one way to diversify that money, so it's not all in stocks, bonds, whatever. But yeah, I'd say if you were looking to diversify your money, I think franchising is a great way to diversify it. I don't think there's any amount that's too much, because, like I said, there's that guy down in Atlanta with that one franchise, and there's tons of examples like this.
Right.
But like that one guy down in Atlanta that did 22 deals with this one haircutting franchise, and opening 22 locations is going to cost. I mean, you're probably looking at $4 to $5 million. Mm-hmm. So I mean, that's a lot of money invested. But he sees and I honestly really like that franchise myself, so I kind of see what he sees. But he sees it. He thinks it's the next big thing, and he's putting money towards it. I don't know what that person's total net worth is. I don't know what their total. If the total cost is $5 million, maybe he's putting $1 million of his own. But yeah, it really comes down to your goals and what you're trying to do. Are you trying to build passive income streams, or what do you want? How do you want your money to work for you? Franchising is one way you can make that happen.
Perfect. Well, that's all the questions that I have on my end. If anybody in the webinar has any open questions, please feel free to type them in now. Otherwise, if you've chimed in again on replay, or you didn't get a chance to ask your question, please send it directly to us at info@savivets.org. That's info@savivets.org. And again, Joel, thank you so much. This has been such an incredible webinar, and all of this information has really been great. And so before we close out, why don't you go ahead and tell everybody how they can get a hold of you?
Yeah, sure. If you wanted to go to my website, integritycommercial.biz, that's integritycommercial.biz. I've got, it's kind of a hybrid webinar, because my business still technically is commercial real estate business brokerage and franchise consulting. But if you go to the franchise section, I've got a searchable database of franchises you can look through. I've got a funding tool there to try to figure out, what type of franchise or what investment level of franchise you might be able to get in with. If you go to the schedule a franchise consultation tab, there is a link to my franchise navigator profile. And if you're serious about getting into franchising and you want me to help you, that is where I would start. Is if you go to my website, integritycommercial.biz, go to the franchising section and go to schedule a consultation. Follow that link. It takes 10 minutes to go through this franchise navigator assessment, but the amount of information that it gives me into what type of thing you'll find personally rewarding. And it gives me a lot more information than that. I mean, it goes down to, kind of how ambitious you are, how much sales is important or how good you might be at sales, what kind of your preferences for team development, solo operator versus small team versus large team, to how much it matters that what you do makes an outside difference. You just care about the money, or do you need to have a greater good aspect to what you're doing? All of that is wrapped into this little 10-minute assessment that you can take. So, and the side benefit is that about 100 franchises are in this system and have their high performer profile on file or integrated into the system. So it doesn't, I wouldn't say it happens a lot, but there is a chance that you might hit the high performer profile for a specific franchise, and I'll get a notification if that comes through. So that's probably the ideal way. You can also, I don't mind if you give me a call. My number is 860-459-9268. Leave a message. There's so many spam calls out there now. Leave a message and I'll call you back, or you can text.
So you 2 o'clock in the morning calls.
Yeah. I don't put my phone on at night though, so don't expect me to wake up for your call. And then my email, joel.stewart@integritycommercial.biz. It also works. So lots of ways to contact me.
Thank you so much again, Joel. Thank you everybody for chiming in. And I hope that this was as valuable to you as it was to me. And again, don't forget, any follow-up questions, go ahead and shoot it over to us, info@savivets.org. And don't forget to sign up for future notifications, savivets.org/veterans. Thanks again for tuning in. Thank you, Joel. And we will see you guys soon. Bye-bye.
All right. Thank you very much for having me.
Thanks.